Hi guys, it's cold and windy again. I'm doing my evening hay delivery. Today's subject of the video is about Grindavik, of course, again, but the whole Reykjavik Peninsula and what is going on with the land rise underneath Swartsengi. And there are predictions when we will see the next eruption, and it's going to be soon. So let's discuss this. I'll go inside and then let's talk about this. Here's my update about what's going on in Grindavik. This video got delayed a little bit because I had to report about the ridiculous things that are going on with the Blue Lagoon. So I really urge you to check out that video because it's a soap opera and you're going to have a laugh. I'll put it in the end screen. So the residents, the businesses were very, very angry. And we just heard in my last video, one resident who's lived there all his life, he says they're kicking us out and they're trampling on our rights. And they've basically just killed the town by killing the businesses. And so the police chief of Sudorns, Olfa Ludvigsson, he will meet with businesses later today and with employers of Grindavik, and then they want to review together what has been done to the town. So Olfa Ludvigsson, he's the police chief of the Sudorns area, and he says that based on the current situation in Grindavik, his aim is now to have more access to the town in the near future. And he says, I rather expect that given that the earth is behaving erratically, that we can expect changes any day, but we know the next eruption is probably going to happen in about 3 weeks. So they have a little bit of a time frame where it might remain a little bit more calm. So the companies, the businesses of Grindavik, they have sent out an appeal yesterday where they said they have absolutely reached their limit of tolerance and that it is important for them to open up the town for increased activity again. So the town council of Grindavik has sent this resolution to the police chief in Sudorn, and he seems to have accepted that. So at least he's willing to talk to them. And so that's a good situation, I believe. So 1 week has passed since the last eruption on the Reykjavik Peninsula, and the Icelandic MET Office has released some news today. They have done model calculations, and these calculations indicate that the magma in the magma chamber underneath Swartsengi, where the power plant is and the Blue Lagoon, will reach a similar level as it had before the last eruption that we have seen just a week ago, basically, right? So it is filling up again. So the land rise underneath Swartsengi continues its pattern, and the speed at which it is rising again is very similar to what it was after the last magma run from there. So basically January 14th. So it's repeating again. Everything's the same as before every eruptions. So what they're saying is that model calculations that are based on GPS data from the end of the current eruption that ended on February 9th show that the magma accumulation until February, the end of February 14th, is about 2 to 3 million cubic meters. So they estimated that when the eruption began on February 8th, that the magma chamber had about 10 million cubic meters inside that then did run from Swartsengi into the Sudnuka crater series and were causing the eruption. So the measurements vary. Some have said 9 million cubic meters, some said maybe 10 to 13 million cubic meters. So there is some time left to refill it. So they're thinking that the interval between the eruptions in the future, they think this is going to be erupt, repeat, erupt, repeat. So the interval will be about 3 to 4 weeks. So if that magma accumulation that we're seeing again right now continues at the same rate, the amount of magma will reach that 10 million cubic meters by the end of February or maybe the beginning of March. And then we can assume that the probability of a magma flow and eruption will increase significantly. And these model calculations, they are based on GPS data, and they will be updated once they have new satellite data. So then we have to review it again. So the seismic activity in the area that's north of Grindavik, where there's the crater and the eruption, remains mild. But since Monday, February 12th, there have been some small earthquakes of the magnitude 1 or less. So there is a new hazard map that the Icelandic MET Office has released. And basically, if you look at it, they have decreased the hazard level of zone 3. So that has come down from red to orange now. They're saying that the seismic activity in the western side of Fagradalsfjall continues. There have been around 80 small earthquakes around or below 1.5 in magnitude since February 12th, and the depth of the earthquakes under the western side of Fagradalsfjall is constantly around 6 to 8 kilometers deep, so not super deep. And they're also saying they will continue to closely monitor this area. So that new hazard map is valid for the next week without any changes. But if there's more earthquakes or if there's anything, then it definitely will be adjusted. So in all areas of the map, that's what they're saying. The likelihood for an eruption right now has decreased everywhere, but definitely the probability of landslides into cracks and fissure movements within Grindavik is still considered high. So that is a different hazard level that they have. They call this crack collapse, and that is still high because the last month have shown, even after the eruption has ended, these fissures kept widening, getting longer, opening, new sinkholes were formed, and they kept discovering more things underneath concrete slabs, inside buildings. So there might be way more stuff that they haven't even discovered yet. And guys, since we're in the middle of the video, it would be awesome if you could give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't yet. So thank you so much for that, and let's continue with the video. Then there's an update from the Icelandic Red Cross. It's like over a month since they started collecting money for the residents of Grindavik. It was kind of an emergency collection for the residents, and their latest figures that they have released is like over 45 million Icelandic kronas have been collected. And then they're saying over 20 million have been distributed. And the Red Cross says it's just nice to see how much support the people of Grindavik are getting from the nation and also from people abroad. 10 million of those came from the Faroe Islands, basically their tiny little neighbor of Iceland. So there's a lot of interest from outside or close to Grindavik. And I've read in the comments that people said, well, the Red Cross is not really reliable. A lot of money goes to pay executives and not much of that money ends up actually with the people that it's supposed to be for. I have heard that in the past too, I have to say, and I'm always very suspicious of organizations because, yeah, they usually have an overhead of administration. So usually when I do something, I'd like to do it directly. But here, I don't know. It would be interesting maybe to email them and ask them how much is taken away by them for administration. They haven't said anything yet. So 45 million have been collected, over 20 million have been distributed. So I'd say hurry up and distribute the rest, right? That's barely half that has been distributed. So I'll follow up with this, and if you know more, let me know in the comments. It definitely would be very interesting to really know how much ends up with the residents. And then there's a few residents that have voiced concerns about the government buyout, because they say usually when the government is involved and they buy out properties, they just forget about it, and not think about it. And then, it gets into a great state of disrepair. So what they would like to do is, even if the state buys them out, they think it's very important that they are being given the chance to go to the properties and take care of the properties, to keep up with the properties, because they're saying, we know from stories from elsewhere that property that is owned by the state, it's just been abandoned, and they don't want that for their properties. Some of them have built them themselves, right? So and some homes do have very little damage, and the residents are still saying they want to return if the situation warrants it, right? So they will come back, but also they know that they can expect that this situation of unrest is probably going to last for several years, and so they probably will not be able to move back to the town full time. But I get it. And what's the other option? That they tear everything down? I don't know. I mean, some are making the jokes, and I have to say it even came to my mind. Maybe they rent it out to tourists that want to visit the Blue Lagoon, right? As bed and breakfast or Airbnb or whatever, like adventure tourism. And also one thing has happened, the fight between the journalists and the residents of Grindavik. The journalists have filed a lawsuit that they were not given enough access to the town to document the disaster. And the police chief says, the reporter tried to break into a home and document the damage. So the residents were angry. And so the police chief really restricted their access. But in the last few days, more residents of Grindavik have spoken to journalists and photographers. So in order to give them the chance to really document what's going on in Grindavik and to document the consequences of this massive natural disaster. And and that's what the Prime Minister of Iceland has said, that because of these events, what's been going on the Reykjanes Peninsula is that these events are the biggest challenges for the Icelandic society since the foundation of the Republic. And so those challenges do definitely not go away when there's access to the town. It is tragic. The residents are saying we're going into a ghost town, and there are signs in the windows that say home abandoned. It's really a dire situation, and it's really not nice. And some are saying, I just want to stay at home. I just want to live at home. Some say we don't see a future. Some say, how much longer do we have to wait until we're released from this situation? The businesses are saying, if there's no housing for our employees, how can we operate? And some businesses have invested into real estate in the town to subsidize, having their employees close by. And the problem is that the government has said we're only paying out residential properties, and only if you have been a resident in that town, the owner has been a resident in that home at the time of November 10th. So the businesses are left in limbo because they have invested and bought homes. And what about the rental companies? So that is difficult. Some politicians have indicated that there might be a solution. The residents are still not happy with the amount that they're getting, so they want more. They want something closer to market value. One politician has said, a few billion more or less, that's just peanuts. I don't really think so, because they're already struggling right now to get the money together. And if the insurance doesn't pay, then they have an even bigger problem. And we know how insurances are. And now you're dealing with the natural disaster insurance, but you're also dealing with the reinsurer, who's probably the biggest problem, trying to wind themselves out of it. But, I don't know. We will have to watch this and see what's going to come out of that. A lot of residents are still of the opinion that that new bill that the government has proposed about the buyout of the homes is not fair. So one resident of Grindavik says that the difficult situation of Grindavik will not be solved by the government's bill. And he says the uncertainty continues, and he criticizes the government, and he says they're talking a lot, but they're doing little. And he says it's very, very clear already that some people will lose from the home purchase bill, while others will make a gain. So he didn't really elaborate how some people will gain from it and how some people will lose, but the resident also says we have absolutely no idea what will happen next, and the government's proposals are not helping anything. And he says that the assessment of the homes, that is, they're using the fire insurance assessment. He says that assessment does not give the correct value of the property. And he, for example, he's in a very difficult situation because he lives in a brand new house. And he says, we expect to always be in the red, and we're not talking about tens of thousands of dollars. We're talking about way more. So of course the fire insurance assessment is significantly lower than the market value of the property, not the current market value that is probably close to zero, but the market value it had before November 10th. And he says many residents are in the same situation, and yes, they are. I think here's the catch. And he says, you've probably heard that many people of Grindavik who have a high fire compensation assessment on properties that would never have received the same value. So as far as I understand it, they're the ones who are profiting from this. And he says, I think it's worth with newer properties. So what about those properties that are still in the construction phase? For them, it's just a pure loss. So very, very difficult. We have to see also what the government will do in the coming days and weeks. So this resident, he has commented on the bill. It was open, the bill was proposed, and then it was open for comments for a few days. He also criticizes the fact that the rights of first-time buyers are not covered in the bill. And so, because there are a lot of first-time home buyers in the town, and he says their right to get it back, to get that money back, will be taken from them. He says he hopes that there will be some major changes in this bill, since the residents now had the chance to express their comments. He says the government hugely, widely underestimates the costs that the people of Grindavik had to pay or had to come up with in the recent months. And he says we had to move 3 times. We have spent a few $100,000 on transport, gas, and other costs that otherwise would have never been incurred. And he adds that the spiritual side must not be forgotten. And he says that a lot of people of Grindavik simply have, like, their batteries are empty, and they can't even work. They can't even go to work. They're just exhausted. And he says you only hear the representatives of the government, the prime minister, the minister of finance, and the minister of infrastructure talking and talking and talking. But it has done nothing. That's basically what he says. So he also criticizes that the response of the government was very late. And he says it would have been possible way faster to install modular houses earlier. And I think he's right with that, right? Homes that don't have a foundation and they can't crack that easily. he says he's also very surprised that in some areas that it was even permitted to build homes to begin with. So he says the neighborhood that he lived in and where his home was built is a declared fissure zone. So that is very interesting. So will there be suits following that? The government, that they're saying it's the government's fault for even handing out building permits. So because that resident says he's not from Grindavik, and he says he did not receive any information about the dangers in the area when he bought the property. I know what he's trying to do here. And he says he's very surprised by the building officials and the planning officials. And he says, it hit me when I got the keys and asked where would be the best place to put a hot tub drain. And then he says the answer I got was, it's based on lava. The water just flows down. No need for drainage. Okay, so that's interesting. Oh, you don't need drainage because there's a Swiss cheese of cracks, sinkholes, and lava tunnels underneath you. And he says, these are all kinds of questions that we don't have answers for. So I think there's trouble in the works for the government of Iceland. So very interesting point of view. Of course, a lot of people are saying, well, if you live on a volcanic island, it's not the government's fault if a volcano erupts. If he's not from there and he didn't know that this is a fissure area, maybe he has a point legally. So guys, that was my update about everything that's going on in Grindavik right now. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Thank you so much for the support you're giving my channel through the supers that you keep buying for me, through the coffees that you keep buying for me on my buymeacoffee.com website. I really appreciate it, and all the animals appreciate it a lot. So thank you for that. Check out the 2 videos in the end screen, and more updates are coming soon because there's more trouble in the works. And I think a lot of people are now trying to cause trouble. Are they right to cause that trouble or not? We will see, but there's more coming. Trouble with the defense walls and how they were built and stuff like that. So stay tuned with me and subscribe. Click the notification bell so that you don't miss any of that ongoing drama, guys. So guys, that was my update on Grindavik today. If you like this video, please leave it a like. As I already said, I'd be very grateful for that, so the algorithm pushes this video a little bit out in the world. And I'll release more updates very soon. There's something happening again at Kampiflegrei and even in other places in Europe. It's rumbling everywhere. So you'll see these updates shortly. So to everyone who sees my videos in the morning with their coffee, good morning, guys. Enjoy your coffee, and I hope to see you soon. Check out the 2 videos in the end screen. Bye bye.